Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 4. They are Norma Hayati, Aziza Hitari, Chelsea, Linda Puspita Aryani, Aisyah, and Yeremia Ronald. So today we will explain about correlational research. So, hope you guys pay attention about this material. Here we go. Guys, for the first, I will explain about definition. In general, a correlational study is a quantitative method of research in which you have two or more quantitative variables from the same group of subjects, and you are trying to determine if there is a relationship or a covariation between the two variables, a similarity between them, not a difference between their means. Theoretically, any two quantitative variables can be correlated as long as you have scores on this variable from the same participant. However, it is probably a waste of time to collect and analyze data when there is little reason to think these two variables would be related to each other. Correlational research is a research method that examines how variables are naturally related in the real world without any attempt by their searcher to alter or change them. The basic research question for correlation research is what is the relationship between two or more variables for a given set of subjects. For example, there is a relationship between intelligence and academic achievements. That is, persons who get high score on intelligence tests tend to have high grade point average, and persons who get low scores on intelligence tests tend to have low grade point averages.
Next is the purpose. The purpose of a correlational study may to be determine relationship between variables or relationship studies, or to use this relationship to make prediction or prediction studies. Correlational studies typically investigate a number of variables believed to be related to a major complex variable such as achievement. Variables found not to be highly related to achievement will be dropped from further examination, whereas variables that are highly related to achievement may be examined in causal cooperative or experimental studies to determine the nature of the relationship.
Well, in this part, we are going to talk about purpose of correlational studies. So, purpose of correlational studies, the correlation is a way to measure how associated or related two variables are. The researcher looks at things that already exist, determines if and in what way those things are related to each other. The purpose of doing correlations is to allow us to make a prediction about one variable based on what we know about another variable. And also there are 3 points about that. For the first is correlational studies are carried out to explain important human behavior or to predict likely outcomes. And then for the second one, if a relationship of sufficient magnitude exists between two variables, it becomes possible to predict a score on either variable if a score on the other variable is known, or we call it prediction studies. And then for the third, the variable that is used to make the prediction is called the predictor variable, or we call it independent. So I think that's all for me about this slide, purpose of correlational studies, and thank you.
The next presentation is about process of correlational research, problem selection. Correlational studies may be designed either to determine whether and how a set of variables are related or test hypotheses regarding expected relationships. Variables to be correlated are selected on the basis of some rationale. That is, the relationship to be investigated should be a logical one, suggested by theory or derived from experience. And math attitudes and math achievement, teachers' sense of efficiency and their effectiveness, increases the ability to meaningfully interpret results. Having a theoretical or experiential basis for selecting variables to be correlated makes interpretation of results more meaningful. This research strategy, appropriately referred to as a shoot-gun or fishing approach, is very inefficient and makes findings difficult to interpret. So I think just enough for me, and thank you.
Okay, next, participant and instrument selection. The sample for a correlational study is selected by using an acceptable sampling method, and 30 participants are generally considered to be a minimal acceptable size. There are, however, some factors that influence the size needed for the sample. The higher the validity and reliability of the variables to be correlated, the smaller the sample can be, but not less than 30. If validity and reliability are low, a larger sample is needed because errors of measurement may mask the true relationship. As in any study, it is important to select or develop valid and reliable measures of the variables being studied. The measuring instruments to be used in a correlational study must be carefully selected. If the measures used don't represent the intended variables, the resulting correlation coefficient will not accurately indicate the degree of relationship. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the third is design and procedures. The basic correlational research design is not complicated. Scores for two or more variables of interest are obtained for each member of the sample, and the paired scores are then correlated. The result is expressed as a correlation coefficient that indicates the degree of relationship between the two variables. Some studies investigate more than two variables, and some utilize complex statistical procedures, but the basic design is similar in correlational studies.
In data analysis, it is to compute the appropriate correlation coefficient. What is correlation coefficient? It is when two variables are correlated, the result is a correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient indicates the size and direction of the relationship between variables. So we are going to the size of correlation. It has four important points. For the first one is general rule. Less than 35 is a low correlation. Between 36 and 65 is a moderate correlation. Above 66 is a high correlation. The second one is prediction. Between 60 and 70 are adequate for group prediction. Above 80 is adequate for individual prediction. Next is criterion related validity. Above 60 for effective scale is adequate. Above 80 for taste is minimally acceptable. And the last is inter-reader reliability. Above 90 is very good. Between 80 and 89 is acceptable. Between 70 and 79 is minimally acceptable. And the last, lower than 69 is problematic. Or you can see at our PDF on page 194. It is explained about relationship between the variables in correlational coefficient. And next is the second one is direction. Direction has 2 points, positive and negative. In positive, high scores on the predictor are associated with high score on the criterion. Low scores on the predictor are associated with low scores on the criterion. In negative, high score on the predictor are associated with low scores on the criterion, and low scores on the predictor are associated with high score on the criterion.
In summary, correlational research is used to explore covariant relationship between two or more variables. A simple definition of a covariant relationship is as one variable changes, so does the other variables. The purpose of correlational research is to identify variables that related to one another, to make prediction of one variable from another, to examine possible cause and effect relationship between one variable and another. So that's all about our explanation. Thank you for your good attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.